A new job category is forming. The people who step into it first are going to see the biggest pay jumps of their careers. Most people have no idea how close we are to quantum deadlines, or what's already happening behind the scene. In this video, you're going to learn which industries fall first, why governments quietly set 2026 as the turning point, and how a handful of people will get an unfair career advantage from this shift. And I'm saying that as someone with 8 years as a cryptographer in the Air Force, 15 years in cybersecurity, and a decade of autistic quantum obsession. If you want the full Quantum Proof Your Career briefing, plus the quiz that tells you exactly where to start learning, they're both free below. I'll send updated versions as this timeline evolves. What if the ground started shifting under you before anyone noticed? AI arrived fast enough to blindside almost everyone. Quantum is the next hit, and it's already moving in the shadows. Here's the part that rarely makes headlines. Encrypted data is already harvested right now so it can be decrypted later. This is a whole archives of messages, medical records, financial trails, cloud backups, all collected because quantum will eventually peel them all open. And the timeline to prevent this is years, not decades. 61% of organizations haven't mapped where their encryption lives. 95% have no quantum roadmap. And governments have already posted their deadlines, 2026, while almost nobody's watching. Most people assume that this is future stuff, while the countdown keeps grinding forward. And that gap, the space between reality and perception, is where anyone paying attention gets an unfair advantage. If you see the shift before it becomes a headline, then you can learn the landscape before it becomes a requirement. And you'll understand the stakes while everyone else still treats quantum like a mythological creature. So here's the spark. If the future already started tilting, what's the move that puts you on the fault line before it becomes an aftershock? Why is the quantum gold rush forming, and why does almost nobody notice? There's a race underway. Governments are drawing clear boundaries. The EU expects public systems to begin migrating by 2026. NIST locked in the post-quantum standards, FIPS 203, 204, and 205. And critical sectors are being pushed to identify where their cryptography actually lives. Pressure is building across finance, healthcare, cloud, logistics, and energy. Yet most organizations have no inventory, no migration plan, and no real understanding of how deep their cryptographic dependencies run. The workforce numbers tell the same story. Less than 3% of cybersecurity professionals have any post-quantum literacy. Fewer than 1% can run a cryptographic inventory. Demand for quantum readiness skills is outpacing candidates 10 to 1 across major industries. And budgets are already shifting to compensate for it. Early hires are being offered $180K to $220K for crypto inventory and assessment roles, $250 to $320K for migration leads, and $350K plus for architects who can guide the transition in high-risk sectors. Those numbers climb even higher inside finance, defense, and major cloud environments. This is why the moment feels like standing in a town right before the gold rush breaks open. The money's moving and the deadlines are fixed. The infrastructure overhaul is guaranteed, and somehow most people still treat quantum as a future problem. The silence is your opportunity. When a shift this large moves in plain sight, early attention becomes leverage, which brings us to the question that changes everything. What's the real reason this transition creates more opportunity than AI? How did AI catch everyone off guard? And what does that mistake teach us now? Nobody felt the exact moment it shifted. 1 minute AI was a research curiosity, and the next entire industries were left scrambling. People weren't ready, the companies weren't ready, and governments definitely weren't either. AI literacy lagged, and workers were displaced in real time, while organizations burned millions trying to catch up. And the small group that paid attention early moved into leadership, built tools, shaped policy and culture. They weren't necessarily the smartest or the most qualified, they were simply awake while everyone else was asleep at the wheel. Here's what people forget. Disruption doesn't announce itself. It creeps and accelerates, then it detonates. Quantum is following the same curve, except the stakes hit harder. This time, the shift rewires trust, privacy, identity, critical systems, and entire digital histories. And this time, the deadline is printed in public. The last wave rewarded early movers, and this wave rewards people who move before the countdown finishes. So if AI was the warning shot, which industries get hit first when quantum breaks the timeline? Imagine a line of dominoes stretching across the entire global economy. They're massive pillars, each one holding decades of encrypted data, critical systems that can't go offline, and information that was never designed to survive a cryptographic reset. Now picture the first one starting to tilt. That's banking and finance. Every encrypted transaction, payment rail, authentication system, and decades of financial records that become readable the moment harvested archives crack open. This sector carries more long-lived data than almost any other, and it's built on algorithms that quantum eventually breaks. Then there's healthcare, stuff like medical records that legally must stay secure for a lifetime. That's genomic data, insurance datasets, high-value biomedical research. It's the perfect target for harvest now, decrypt later attacks because the data never loses its value. Then there's governments and defense. Nation-states collecting encrypted traffic today, like classified documents, diplomatic cables, mission systems. These are archives that have to remain confidential for 20 to 50 years. And all of them depend on cryptography with a predictable expiration date. Now we have blockchain and Web3. That's wallets, signatures, smart contracts. Everything rests on elliptic curve keys. Once those keys fall, the entire security model collapses. Upgrading global change requires coordination that doesn't exist yet, while billions remain exposed in the meantime. Then there's big tech and cloud, like TLS, PKI, identity, firmware signing, and IoT fleets. Every layer depends on cryptography. A migration here means rewiring the backbone of the whole internet without shutting it down. And lastly, we have critical infrastructure, stuff like energy grids, aviation systems, transportation and logistics networks, SCADA environments with 20 to 30-year life cycles. These systems cannot be taken offline, and their cryptography is often embedded directly in hardware. Each sector has its own pressure point. Each one has deadlines that won't move. Each one adds weights to the transition that's now in motion. So if those are the dominoes, how close are we to the moment the first one actually falls? There's a clock running behind all of this, and it's not subtle. Like we said earlier, the EU marked 2026, yes, that's next month, as the point where quantum-safe migration needs to begin. That's crypto inventories, certificate chains, key lifetimes. These are becoming board-level discussions, not little side projects for engineering teams. Here's the part people underestimate. You can't replace cryptography the way you replace software. A full transition takes 7 to 10 years, even with strong teams and clean systems. So if the starting line is 2025 to 2026, and the finish line pushes into the early to mid-2030s, and most experts, nearly 70%, expect quantum computers capable of real cryptanalytic impact to appear within that same window. That's why the people gaining experience now will be the ones leading the migration later. By the time everyone else realizes they're behind, the early movers will already be in decision-making roles. The timelines are public, the expectations are clear, so the real question becomes, what does someone actually need to understand to navigate this transition with confidence and position themselves ahead of the shift? What do you actually need to learn to navigate a post-quantum world? The path looks overwhelming until the structure appears. Start with quantum basics, the mental model, how quantum computers work, why algorithms fall, and why others survive because not every algorithm does. Layer in modern cryptography so that PQC fits into real systems. Then comes the core, post-quantum crypto migrations, inventorying cryptography, mapping dependencies, piloting new algorithms, testing hybrid modes, rolling out upgrades without breaking anything critical. Add quantum risk thinking, long-lived data, harvested archives, and systems that can't fail. Then cement it with tiny hands-on experiments like post-quantum crypto-enabled TLS, hybrid key exchanges, certificate swaps, small migrations inside test environments. And once these pieces click together, the transition stops feeling impossible and it becomes a path. What does the quantum transition look like at the global level? How massive is the quantum transition? And who moves to the front when everything shifts? Every once in a while, technology forces a reset at the foundation. The quantum transition is one of those moments. Encryption, identity, and long-lived data is shifting. Government timelines are already public, the EU set 2026, NIST finalized their PQC standards, and critical sectors are mapping cryptographic dependencies right now. All of this is happening in plain sight, but the gap between announced and understood is enormous. That gap is where new leadership emerges. The people who show up early guide their organizations. They shape migration plans and influence policy and define what quantum readiness looks like. Now it's time to step into a moment big enough to define careers, industries, and the future of digital trust. So here's the final question. As this transition accelerates, where do you want your name to land in the timeline? And if you want more information guiding you through the quantum transition, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.